Welcome to Prospects to Pros, the show that talks about the guys heading to the NFL, the guys who got drafted into the NFL, everything in between. I'm Andy Staples. I'm here with the Athletics draft guru, Dane Brugler, and we have to talk college football playoff because it's coming. New Year's Eve, the Peach Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl are the semifinals. The winners will head to the national championship game, and we have a lot of draft-eligible prospects to watch on Saturday. So, Dane, I think we should just get into it. And I kind of want to start in Atlanta because it's going through your mock draft. There's something like 8 potential first-round picks in this game. I might be shooting low. Two of the guys, one from each team that you think NFL teams may draft in the first round, aren't even playing because they're hurt. You got Nolan Smith out for Georgia, and you got Jackson Smith and Jigba out for Ohio State. But it is a bounty. And there are some matchups that are going to be fantastic to watch. Where would you like to start? Like we talked about this on the last show where I said I thought Kelee Ringo versus Marvin Harrison Jr. would be my favorite matchup to watch. You said CJ Stroud against the dirty pocket that Georgia will create. But who else are you really looking at in this game that you're thinking they can make some money, they could lose some money here?
Well, I mean, let's touch on those again, because I think they are so important for evaluation purposes. And again, I think we have to say that one game doesn't make or break a prospect, good or bad. But we're all human, subconsciously or consciously on a stage like this with everything at stake. If you're able to play at a very high level, that's going to mean something. Or in the inverse, if you fall flat on your face, that also might mean something. And so,
and you know who else is human is NFL owners are human.
Oh, sure.
And sometimes some of them are very measured, but some of them are very impulsive. And they may see a guy in one game and be like, you have to take that guy to the general manager, or you're never putting this person on my team to the general manager.
Sure. I mean, that absolutely happens. And that's why I always, we talk about draft this time of year. But then I also kind of mentioned how things can change very quickly once coaches get involved, once owners get involved. And that's about to happen here in a few months. But yeah, telling me Jim Irsay, if he doesn't catch one of these games, is not going to, assuming Chris Ballard's still the GM, maybe have a few things to add to the evaluation. Yeah, suggestions. Very good. So, I mean, with CJ Stroud here, let's start with him. Like, this is a quarterback who is, we've talked about him a lot the last few months, last week, very structurally sound. It'll be really interesting to see how they prepare for this Georgia defense. If they do a little bit more to get him on the move, designed or not. That's been the big knock on CJ Stroud. He's just not a very creative quarterback. And, if you give him all the time in the world, he will pick you apart. But when things fall apart, which they often do against the Georgia defense, this Georgia defense, they had 8 draft picks last year, 5 in the first round, and they're still like number 2 in the nation in scoring defense. Like, they're just ridiculous. It's just reload with a lot of, 4 and 5 stars that are playing at a high level. So, this is a big thing for CJ Stroud to see how he can match up against this really tough defense. Can he put the offense on his back? Can he find the answers? That's really what it is. Can you find the answers to the test? And so there's a lot with CJ Stroud that's riding on this game and to see what he can do.
I give you a trivia question, Dane. This blew my mind this morning as I was going through this. How many Georgia defenders have registered a tackle for loss this season?
Oh, wow. I'm assuming it's a lot, so let's go with 15.
26.
Oh, gosh. That's ridiculous.
26. Now, they blow out teams, so there's some younger guys who've gotten into games and gotten to compile a couple things. But I'm looking at the list, and the top, the first 18 or so are guys that play very regularly.
Yeah. I mean, you think about, and that's why Travon Walker last year, and we had there's so much discourse about his evaluation and what he was asked to do, and Jordan Davis only playing 23 snaps a game, and this is a defense That's part of the secret sauce. Is it's not just the talent, it's the way that they sub in guys, keep guys fresh. They have a lot. They go really deep at every single position, and that speaks to that stat. Really speaks to that with the way that they what they ask of their players and the way that they get them involved. So that's a tall task for this Ohio State offense.
Yeah, and now here's the part that I'm interested in, because you've got Paris Johnson, their offensive tackle, as a potential first-round draft pick. You've talked about how much you like DeJuan Jones and how much he's impressed you at his size. The other tackle, their center is a prospect this year. Obviously, everybody that plays for Ohio State was a blue chip recruit. That almost always, that every once in a while they'll have a walk-on who comes, but for the most part, we're talking blue chip of the blue chip. And the question is, will they be capable of blocking this Georgia defensive front? Because there have been moments when they've had to run the ball, had to gain yards on the ground, and couldn't. Like the Northwestern game, when the wind was blowing so badly, you could have had Dan Marino or Joe Montana on your roster and you weren't throwing the ball. They couldn't guarantee yards on the ground against Northwestern. And I realize Northwestern has a couple prospects, but Georgia's got guys that are going to play in the NFL 3 deep.
They do. And that Georgia defensive line, there's not a lot of notable names aside from Jalen Carter. And, with Nolan Smith out, I mean, how many other the regular college football fan can name another Georgia front seven defender? Right. I mean, if you take out Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter, there's a lot of younger guys, guys that aren't well known, but they're still really talented. And so this Ohio State offensive line, that interior, with Jalen Carter going up against the interior of the Ohio State offensive line, is going to be obviously one of the most important matchups in this game. All 3 of Ohio State's interior offensive linemen are going to be drafted, or they're going to play in the NFL. Okay, they have that talent. It's just they don't always play consistent. So, Luke Whippler at center. He'll have an NFL decision to make after this game. I think Donovan Jackson, the left guard, has the highest ceiling, but he's only a sophomore, not eligible. And then Matthew Jones at right guard, he also has a chance. He has some draftable grades this year. So they've got guys. It's just a matter of, can they do enough to execute the game plan? Jalen Carter, we've talked about him at length many times. His block destruction is special, and that ability to break down the rhythm of blockers will destroy an offensive game plan. And so that is going to be a major factor in this game, what they do. And then on the edges, Paris Johnson, DeJuan Jones. Really, I mean, in my mock draft, I had 3 offensive tackles going in that first round. 2 are playing in this game, with Paris Johnson on one side for Ohio State and Broderick Jones, the left tackle for Georgia, on the other side. And the other offensive tackle in my mock draft was Peter Skoronski, who might not even play offensive tackle at the next level. So if you want an offensive tackle, if your NFL team does, this is the game to watch to see how these guys hold up. It'll be a really, and let's just talk about Broderick Jones too, while we're talking about the offensive linemen. Broderick Jones, when he struggled this year, you throw on the Missouri tape, you throw on the LSU tape, he struggled against power and guys that could really get into his chest. He's a really good athlete. You love the movement skills. But when he struggled, it was against some of those guys that could get inside of his body. And Zach Harrison is one of the longest players in college football. I mean, he's got almost 36-inch arms, and that speed, that buildup power could give Broderick Jones some little bit of trouble. So that'll be definitely a matchup to watch.
Yeah, and getting back to the interior of Ohio State's offensive line, you saw in the second half of the Michigan game, they struggled with Mike Morris and Mozzie Smith. Jalen Carter is notches above those, and those guys are good. Like, those guys are getting drafted and potentially pretty high. But Jalen Carter is levels above, and that's the part. And then Georgia's got some young guys that they'll throw in there that can do the same thing. And maybe not as well as Jalen Carter, but do it very well. So that's the part up the middle, because that's where you really, if you're CJ Stroud, you got trouble. And then to your point, do they move him around? Because if you are moving the pocket, then that becomes less of an issue, because when you got to make that guy who's breaking through the A gap run and sprint to where the quarterback is sprinting to, you're going to wear him out. So
Yeah.
it is possible to negate that a bit.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of game plan Ohio State has in terms of the protection. Do they keep it back home to block? Do they do a lot of movement? Do they a lot of quick game? It really will be interesting. I mentioned on the last pod how I don't think that like Kelee Ringo, every single you watch him on tape, every single snap, he's immediately retreating. He's immediately going backwards. And he gives up a lot of stuff in front of him. But it will be tougher for them to win over the top against a Marvin Harrison, not only because of that coverage, but also the pass rush getting home. So does Ohio State pivot a little bit and use a lot more movement than they've shown? CJ Stroud's not a bad athlete. He can do it, at least physically. But is he comfortable doing it? That's
Right.
the unknown of this. And so that will definitely be really interesting to watch. I mean, we know Ohio State's got the talent to match up with Georgia. They do. Ohio State could have the most draft picks in April of any college football team. It is very, very possible. It's just a matter of do they have the right game plan in place to match up what Georgia's going to throw at them.
That's what's interesting to me. And you mentioned keeping it in front of them. That was exactly Georgia's plan against Tennessee, which was the most explosive offense they played, where they never let anybody get behind them. They were happy to let Hendon Hooker throw the ball 8 yards and just clobber the guy as soon as he caught it. And that doesn't work. Like Jalen Hyatt doesn't break loose that way. Cedric Tillman doesn't break loose that way. And I would imagine that is the plan. Hendon Hooker's a better runner than CJ Stroud. And their plan was light up Hendon Hooker too. And that's the problem with Georgia. And you've seen this throughout the time Kirby Smart's been there. He has more at his disposal now. Like I go back to that Rose Bowl against the Baker Mayfield Oklahoma team. And they initially tried to keep everything in front of him, and Baker just picked him apart. And Kirby's like, screw it, put an extra guy in the box. You guys play man, and we'll deal with it. And they ended up winning the game because of that. Now, I'm not even sure they got to put the extra guy in the box. Like, I think they can get pressure, and you saw it because they bring the fourth guy from different places, and occasionally they bring the fifth guy. But they've got guys, they've got a adequate coverage, it feels like, every time.
Yeah, and I mean, Christopher Smith had a big game in the SEC championship game against LSU. Not to talk too much about Kelee Ringo, but this is a big game for him to show that he is a natural cover man. Like we've said before,
Trevon Diggs, baby. Gamble.
Right. And with Ringo, he's going to size speed off the charts. But, if he needs to have a good game, he's not a lock top 20 pick, put it that way, because the awareness, the technique, so it's done all just look natural for him. And so in the NFL, it'll be a little bit easier to complete passes on him. So this will be a big game for Ringo. I mean, you're looking at that front seven for Georgia, and are we going to see maybe an underrated player shine through, like a name to keep an eye on is Robert Beal for Georgia, number 33, who with Nolan Smith out, you want to see him maybe step up a little bit. He's a fifth-year senior. He's been in the program for a long time. Good sized player. He's 6'4", 255 pounds, has 34.5-inch arms, Georgia kid. He's already 23 years old. He's an older player, and so this is his time to shine. If we're going to see maybe a lesser-known player shine for Georgia, I think it could be Robert Beal.
That is an excellent choice, because that's a guy who was generating buzz before the season just because of his traits. Right. But, it's Georgia, and you're not going to put up big – it's the same reason Jermaine Johnson left Georgia and went to Florida State. Wanted to be an every down player and showed he was a first-round draft pick. So sometimes with Georgia, the stats don't necessarily tell the story. Let's flip the ball around. Talk about when Georgia's on offense, when Ohio State's on defense. Steele Chambers, the converted running back, linebacker, he said he's coming back. Tommy Eichenberg, the linebacker, has said he's not sure what he wants to do. This is a person who I want to see what he does, because he's going to have to deal with Darnell Washington. He's going to have to deal with Brock Bowers. He's going to have to tackle Kenny McIntosh. You better have a great game.
Yeah, in Georgia, we know they use more of a committee-based run game. That's kind of the foundation of their game plan. But yeah, no doubt, McIntosh is the lead dog there. Leads the team in rushing. I think he's got 10 touchdowns now. He was my top-ranked running back prospect among the seniors in the summer, and I think he's done a nice job this year as being the guy. He's probably gonna be somewhere in that third, fourth round range. He's got really good hands out of the backfield. But Tommy Eichenberg, there are some scouts that are super high on Tommy Eichenberg. They believe he could be a top 50, top 60 pick, which surprised me a little bit just because I think his coverage is a little hit or miss. But as a run defender, he is lights out. I mean, extremely disciplined with his eyes, with his fits, strong wrap tackler. His downhill angles and burst are just outstanding. And so Tommy Eichenberg he'll have an NFL decision to make after this one. He said he's undecided, or he said he hasn't really thought about it yet. It'll be interesting to see what he does after this one. But I think, to your point with these tight ends, because there's no doubt Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, that's how Georgia wants to play with those two guys in terms of moving the football. How they match up against the Ohio State safeties, whoever wins that matchup, that might determine the outcome of this game. Brock Bowers, he leads the team in receiving. Darnell Washington's top 4 on the team in receiving. And then
let's be clear, Brock Bowers would be their best running back too if they just handed him the ball.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, exactly. But even as a blocker, Brock Bowers, I don't think gets enough credit with what he does. Now, Darnell Washington, that's, there aren't many lean, athletic 280-pounders like him out there. But that's what he offers, is what he as a blocker. So how Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington match up with Ronnie Hickman and Lathan Ransom, the Ohio State safeties, and they go deeper than that, Tanner McAllister and a couple other guys. But those two guys, especially Ransom and Hickman, that really could tell the story of this game. I mean, Hickman, he's already declared for the draft. He'll be in this class. I think he's got a chance to go top 100 because he's a big, long, speedy guy. He's been Ohio State's best cover man in the secondary. But I think a part of that is that he doesn't take a lot of chances. I want to see him take a little more chances in this one. He's given up only one catch of 15 yards or more this year. So Ronnie Hickman's in very good in coverage. And then Lathan Ransom, he's a little more hit or miss. His highs are higher than Hickman, but his lows are lower when you just break down his film. And so can Ransom play? Because you watched the Maryland game and Ransom's all over the place.
He was all over the field,
Yeah. But against Michigan, it was the opposite. He did not have a good game against Michigan. So what can he have a strong game, both those safeties? That will go a long way to limiting those two tight ends for Georgia.
Yeah, I am going to be very intrigued by this. And Darnell Washington as a receiver, because I still think they were messing around with LSU in the SEC championship game. That 2-point conversion to Darnell Washington, just get this on tape for whoever has to play in the playoffs to scare the hell out of you, because that's exactly what that is he has not been used as much as a receiver as I think he will be in the NFL, strictly because Brock Bowers is on the team with him. And but if the matchup is there, they're going to take it. And then there's a guy we have not talked about yet. And it was a very polarizing topic when it came to the Heisman Trophy. I don't think he will be when it comes to the draft. But Stetson Bennett, I believe Stetson Bennett will make an NFL roster and will draw an NFL paycheck for a number of years. Do I think he'll ever be a starting quarterback in the NFL? Probably not. But this is a very good college quarterback who you mentioned Zach Harrison. Well, if Zach Harrison breaks through and puts pressure on Stetson Bennett's proven he can move around enough to negate a little bit of pressure.
He can move. Stetson Bennett, when he first came in a couple of years ago, we were thinking JT Daniels was going to be the future for Georgia. And Stetson Bennett comes in, and it was just like, who's this guy? Like, what? This is the best Georgia can do. And just over time, he's gotten better and better and better, and quieted a lot of doubters. Now, I mean, I didn't think that Stetson Bennett belonged in New York for the Heisman ceremony. I thought Hendon Hooker got robbed, but Stetson Bennett has had a very good year, and I think that he has a chance to get drafted, which I did not think over the summer. The way he's played, the way he's been a distributor of the football, the size is average, the arm is average, but the ball comes out clean. It comes out on time. He has a good feel for where pressure's coming from. And to your point, he's a better athlete than you expect. He can move around
the athleticism is above average. That's the part I think people don't get. They think, oh, there's this try hard guy. No. He's pretty fast, and his instincts are very good in terms of pocket presence and all that. So I am very excited to see that. I think it has a potential to be a very good game if Ohio State plays its best game. Mm-hmm. If Ohio State does not play its best game, you will see some just existential dread coming from Buckeyes fans afterward, because that's the team that we're supposed to be able to match up with, and we can't. And we've lost to Michigan 2 years in a row.
Yeah. There's no doubt. And when you think about Ohio State over the years and when they've had success, I mean, let's go all the way back to like 2014, the first year of the college football playoff, when Ohio State won it all. Against Alabama. I mean, that Sugar Bowl was one of the best games. It's just a fun matchup, back and forth. So many NFL players. Like, it's amazing going back and look at the NFL players on that field, from Ezekiel Elliott to Joey Bosa to Michael Thomas, and then on Alabama with Jonathan Allen and Derrick Henry. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah. But a big reason Ohio State won that game is they got consistent pressure on Blake Sims. And so that is going to be a big part of
also
this.
A big reason Ohio State won that game is Blake Sims was Alabama's quarterback.
Yes, that did play a part. I mean, Cardale Jones, on the other side, he did enough not to hurt Ohio State, but yeah, there's no doubt. Blake Sims had a couple of interceptions in that game that just really held them back. But they were able to, with Michael Bennett at defensive tackle, Joey Bosa at defensive end. I mean, they got consistent pressure on the pocket. And can Ohio State do that this year against a pretty good Georgia offensive line? I mean, Georgia, if Michigan won the Joe Moore Award this year, and we talk about Michigan here in a second, if Georgia won the Joe Moore Award, I don't think anybody would have batted an eye. I mean, I think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
Cedric Van Pangranger, the center, is a prospect that you're going to be talking about, I would imagine, quite a bit this spring.
Well, and maybe even, if he declares, I mean, he's a young player, only a redshirt sophomore, so he has an NFL decision to make. This is not a great center class, and so Van Pran can certainly help that. But yeah, Teron Vincent, Michael Hall, the Ohio State defensive tackles, can they get a little bit of that interior pressure? And then JTT and Zach Harrison and the defensive ends Ohio State has. Can they have any success? Warren McClendon is the Georgia right tackle. I think he's probably an NFL guard, but he could come out and be a guy you look at the top 4 rounds. So this Georgia offensive line is very, very talented, and it's going to be a big part of the game plan for Ohio State. If they're going to win, if they're going to keep it close, it's getting pressure on the quarterback. Yeah.
Well, let's move out to the Fiesta Bowl. Let's talk Michigan and TCU. It's a different vibe here. It's very interesting because the two teams with the most prospects are playing one another in the 1-4 game, and the two teams with the least prospects are playing each other in the 2-3 game. If there's a first rounder on the field, is Quentin Johnston from TCU the receiver? Anybody else on this field that could sneak into that?
I think Mozzie Smith has a chance. Obviously, he's been in the news for the wrong reasons this month, and so that's got to work itself out. I mean, Jim Harbaugh has been very adamant about his decision not to suspend him at all.
And the information about that, I think when you read everything that happened, I understand where Harbaugh and the administration are coming from, and Mozzie Smith was maybe not as clear on the laws as he should have been. But you read the police
report, he's facing felony weapons charges. So for people that don't know, he was pulled over with a loaded gun in his car, and I mean,
he was coming back from the gun range. He had not locked it. Right. Which, if you've ever taken a concealed carry class, like, that's the first thing I tell you: lock that sucker up. Make sure it's not readily available to you. And he had loaded magazines in his pockets. you're going to get in big trouble every time if that happens. And so it will, depending on your state, but
Right.
But if you look at how it's been handled since then, that's one of those, I think in the interviews, he's going to be able to say, I'm sorry, I was trying to learn the right things to do and I didn't know them.
Yeah.
And that may or may not work, but I think you got a shot at that point. But it is interesting because Mozzie Smith, you look at that game against Ohio State, he was very disruptive against the Buckeyes. I think he can be very disruptive against TCU, which, by the way, has a center, Steve Avila, who is a draft prospect.
Yeah, he's playing left guard. Yeah, he was their center.
That's right. He started as their center.
And they moved out to left guard because they brought in Alan Ali from SMU, and so they. But I mean, like, both these guys are like 5-year starters. I mean, they've been they've seen a lot of football, and so that matchup would be a lot of fun. Because Mozzie Smith, and you leave him one-on-one, he can win that matchup and find his way into the backfield pretty quickly. If you double team him, he can handle double teams as well. So he's just he's a really impressive player. But Steve Avila, I like him quite a bit. I mean, he's more of a phone booth guy than a guy you want on the move. But big-bodied, heavy hands, knockback power. So that'll be a good matchup. And then let's talk about Max Duggan. He's already said that he's going to declare for the draft. He was a fourth-year senior, so could have gone back, but I don't blame him for going now. This is a guy that was highly recruited out of Iowa. Ohio State offered him. Nebraska thought they had him, and he decides to Iowa and Kirk Ferentz was the first team to offer him back when he was a sophomore. And he decides that, I want to change of scenery. I want to go to a bigger area in terms of, not a college town. I want to go to a metropolitan area. And he chooses TCU. And, the last 3 years, or his first 3 years, were very up and down. And he wasn't really considered a draft prospect coming into the year.
He didn't even win the starting job this year.
No, exactly. Against Colorado, right? In the opener,
Chandler Morris started.
Yeah.
Chandler Morris. Yeah. The who's father, Chad Morris, longtime high school and college football coach. But and Duggan, though, this decision I think is very interesting because you look at Michael Penix, Bo Nix, some of these quarterbacks who could have come out, who decided to stay. I think Duggan's looking at that and going, you know what? This pushes me up.
Sure. Well, and he already got a Senior Bowl invite. I mean, you look at, because if Penix comes out, Bo Nix comes out, I mean, who knows if Duggan gets that invite, if Hendon Hooker's still healthy. So, you look at this senior class of quarterbacks. I mean, it's Will Levis. Then, there's a little bit of a gap. And then it's, okay, what's the order after that? I mean, I think a lot of people would say Hendon Hooker's next, but that's not going to be a universal thought.
I'm a big
Jay Kaner fan. Aiden O'Connell, a lot of teams like Aiden O'Connell. There are some third-round grades on Aiden O'Connell out there, and Clayton Tune's in the mix, and then Max Duggan's right there with those guys. I mean, after that, my guy from Shepherd, Tyson Bagent. Then you were talking about Stetson Bennett, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Sam Hartman hasn't decided what he's doing yet. So, Max Duggan's got a chance to really capitalize on this season being the Heisman the runner-up. And who knows what he could do in this game. And he's going up against a Michigan defense that's pretty good. I mean, they rank top 5 in the country and yards allowed, points allowed. And so Max Duggan is a guy that when that first option's taken away and there's no clear run lanes, can he find second, third, fourth options in the passing game? That's what I want to see from him in this one. Because that's what TCU is going to need to do to win. It's not going to be just simply ground and pound with Kendre Miller and Duggan. They're going to have to put the ball in the air. And when Quentin Johnston's taken away or Darius Davis or whoever, it'll be a really interesting matchup. I do get back to Quentin Johnston. We talked about Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Kelee Ringo. Quentin Johnston versus Michigan's DJ Turner. That to me is one of the more fun one-on-one matchups. DJ Turner, he's a freaks list guy for our buddy Bruce Feldman. He runs in the 4.2s, 23 miles per hour on the GPS. This guy's got speed, and he's a really physical player. How he matches up Quentin Johnston, who, once you give Quentin Johnston a runway, he just takes off. And his size, the way he tracks the football, he could be a weapon down the field. So that's going to be a lot of fun. For TCU to win, they're going to have to hit a few of those big shots. Yep. And that's going to be a fun matchup between that receiver and corner.
Will Johnson, the 5-star freshman, the corner on the other side, who may find himself matched up against Quentin Johnson. Quentin Johnson's an interesting one because he's the one who scares you. And everyone in the Big 12 knew that's who they're going at most of the time. That's who they're looking for. And they still couldn't stop him. And that would scare me. Another guy I'm excited to watch, and he's already said he's coming back because I think he probably feels like he needs more seasoning on this side of the ball, is Mikey Sainristil at Michigan, the nickel. He's a converted receiver. Made, I think, the biggest play in the Ohio State game when he knocked that ball away from Cade Stover in the end zone.
In the end zone,
I'm excited to see him develop more as a DB because it hasn't been that long since he got moved over from receiver. But DJ Turner and Will Johnson, the two corners at Michigan, those two guys may be the most important players on the field for the Wolverines this week.
Yeah, no doubt. And Sainristil, he's 5'9", 185 pounds. Like, he's just not a big guy. And that's obviously going to complicate his NFL evaluation. But yeah, the more he just shows up and makes plays, that's definitely going to be, something that helps him. Now, on the flip side, talking about Michigan receivers, we saw a few of those guys really shine against Ohio State. Can we see that against TCU, who has a pretty, they've got some guys on that defense that are going to play in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
Including one.
Trevius Hodges-Tomlinson.
Exactly. LaDainian's nephew, who, and like, it's a tough conversation a little bit because he is small. I mean, there's no hiding it. He is under 5'8". He's under 180 pounds. He's under 30-inch arms. I mean, he's small hands. Everything about, his game, just on paper is small, but he plays so much bigger than that. And so can he have another big game going up against Ronnie Bell? Or Cornelius Johnson. And Ronnie Bell's an interesting one because he's as a zone route runner, he will pick you apart all day. He finds the holes in the defense, sits down, he catches the ball really well, but he's not very good in contested situations. And that's music to the ears of Hodges-Tomlinson because he will crowd the catch point. He will get up on you and make it really difficult to finish catches. And so that's going to be a big matchup for Michigan, those receivers, to win the one-on-one matchups. And it's going to be fun to see if TCU can stop that.
Well, and Cornelius Johnson was the breakout star of the Ohio State game, catching all those long passes. Mm-hmm. You look at his game by game throughout his career, he's just never had that. But they've never had a quarterback who could get it to him until J.J. McCarthy, or who could get it down the field that way. And then they didn't ask J.J. McCarthy to really do that until the Ohio State game. I'm kind of curious with these Michigan receivers. Do we really know what they are? Because we haven't gotten a chance to see what they can do, because they haven't had the quarterback to get it to them, or they haven't asked the quarterback to get it to them.
It'll be really interesting to see what Cornelius Johnson does after this, because he's a fourth-year senior. Technically, could go back. If he goes to the draft, he'll be. Senior Bowl's already taken a lot of receivers, but I mean, he's a guy that I know scouts like. I mean, they think he's draftable.
6'3", 208, right size. Yeah,
right. I mean, he's got 32-inch arms. He's a guy that is probably in the 4.48 range in terms of speed. Like, there's a lot there to like with Cornelius Johnson. It's just a matter of, it's not that he can't do it; it just wasn't asked to do it consistently downfield. So, but if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm going to say, hey. Next year is probably our last year with J.J. McCarthy. We need a veteran receiver, and we're gonna unleash it more. We're gonna throw the ball downfield more. I mean, maybe they can convince him to go back to school next year. We'll see.
And one more Michigan player I wanted to ask you about before we get out of here, Dane, is the guy. I think he's the second most important transfer this year behind the Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams. That's Olu Oluwatimi, the center, who came from Virginia. He won the Outland Trophy and the Remington Trophy. From an intangible standpoint, the most important player on Michigan's offensive line. I'm curious, as far as your evaluation, is he the best player on Michigan's offensive line, or how does he fall in terms of evaluation?
So, look, I'm gonna get killed by Michigan fans for this,
Go
but
for it. Be nice. Be honest.
I I'll be honest. I'm not gonna be nice, but I do not like Olu Oluwatimi that much as a prospect.
Interesting.
I gave him a 6 round grade. I think there's a lot of issues that are going to really pop up once he gets to the next level. I don't see a guy, if he's going to be my starter at the next level, that's really going to worry me. He just too often you see him knocked off balance by power. Just that inconsistent balance through contact really bothers me. The inconsistent pad level. He doesn't displace guys. So I think he's really good with that initial positioning, but the sustain is very inconsistent. And he's a center only prospect. And that's something that I know a lot of teams, that'll bother them as well, being a center only. So I think he is draftable, but we're talking about a late round guy more so than a guy that should go in the top 4 rounds. I think because he won all these awards and all that, people are getting a little warped sense of type of prospect he is. But now, with that said, he's still a very, very, to your point, very important to what Michigan does up front.
This is a little like Barrett Jones when he was at Alabama. Critically important to Alabama's team, not necessarily the best NFL prospect.
Right, exactly, 100%. And I think we've seen that this year. I think Ryan Hayes at left tackle probably going to move inside to guard. I think he's a better prospect. Zach Zinter, who I'm told is 50-50 on whether he's coming out or going back to school at guard. He's a really good player. If he comes out, I think he would be the first Michigan offensive lineman drafted. So, that offensive line is such an impressive unit overall, and the way they're coached and the way they execute. And, it starts with each one of those guys. And so that'll, and look, we have to mention, because obviously we know Michigan, they want to run the football, and without Blake Corum. Right. But, Donovan Edwards, he stepped in and averaged 200 yards rushing the last 2 games against Ohio State and Purdue. So we know they can get it done on the ground with Donovan Edwards. What does TCU's run defense? It's 2 guys I'm keeping an eye on here. Linebacker, D. Winters, who is smaller player, and that's going to hurt him in the evaluation process, but he's still draftable because he has outstanding range. The chase speed is very good. The stopping power at contact is very good. He needs to have a big game. And then on the edge, because they run like kind of a 3-man front, on the edge, plays mostly left end, Dylan Horton, the defensive end, 6'4", 275. We talked about him a little bit with Jim Nagy when we had him on a few weeks ago or last month. This is a really underrated player. I think he's a day 2 player all day. He had a great game against Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. If the TCU defense is going to limit that Michigan offense, those 2 players, D. Winters, Dylan Horton, both will be draft picks. I think both need a big game in this one.
So the running game, and I find this very interesting because, TCU not as successful stopping the run against Kansas State, which is a different kind of offense. Against Texas, though, with Bijan Robinson, 21 carries, 28 yards. Now, in college, they take out sacks for rushing, but they only had 2 sacks. TCU only had 2 sacks in that game. They shut down Bijan Robinson in a game that Texas decided to turn into a rock fight, and TCU was perfectly capable of playing that way. And that is the only thing that game is what gives me a glimmer of hope for TCU in this game, is that they did play a team that said, you know what, we're going to try to beat you on the ground. They shut them down, made them one-dimensional, made their quarterback beat them, and Quinn Ewers was not up to the task. JJ McCarthy, though, different story.
Yeah.
We're not talking about him as a draft prospect yet. He's only a sophomore. But we talked earlier about the receivers not being asked to do a ton. JJ McCarthy wasn't asked to do much until the Ohio State game, when he basically put the team on his back for 3 quarters. And I am very excited to see what he does as the competition level rises here in the playoff. I'd love to see him against Georgia, because JJ
Sure.
McCarthy versus Georgia, very different than Cade McNamara last year versus Georgia, but they got to get past TCU first. So can he have that kind of game against TCU? If TCU sells out and like, we are stopping the run, you better beat us through the air. Can he do it?
Yeah, no doubt that'll be a big part of this one. And I mean, the only thing I'd say about Texas TCU is Texas. I feel like they went away from the running game pretty quick in that one. I think Bijan only finished with 12 carries. That's one thing we know Michigan won't do. They will stay with the run game and keep it going. But to your point, JJ McCarthy, if they need him to make a big play through the air, can he do it? His talent is off the charts. I mean, he's not just size movement guy. He's got the arm. He's got a lot of ability there. So yeah, that'll be a big part of this game, and it's something that we look as we get into the summer and look at the 2024 quarterback class. We know about Drake May. We've talked about Caleb Williams. JJ McCarthy could be on a trajectory to at least join them in that top tier. He has that type of ability. It's just, and Quinn Ewers could be there as well. So this will be a fun one to watch for McCarthy, who seems like a really confident, coachable kid, and that's going to help him.
Hey, if you want to see the teammate play, go back to the 2021 Big Ten championship game. There's a Donovan Edwards run against Iowa where JJ McCarthy is lead blocking for him 35 yards down the field. I'm not sure what's more impressive, that JJ McCarthy runs with Donovan Edwards and actually beats him because he gets ahead of him to block for him, but then lays a tremendous block on the guy when he gets there. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I can't wait. I am so excited about the college football playoff. I like these two matchups. I think they're going to be fun games. I hope we don't get two blowouts. I'm tired of the blowouts. I realize the 12 teams coming in a couple of years, but before the 14 dies, give us one where all the games are fun. This might be one of those. Dane, thank you so much. Cannot wait to talk to you afterward. All right.
Great.
Try to get us out.